Mid-America Furniture, 7546 North Milwaukee, Niles, Illinois. Mid-America Furniture إلى only branch لخار. هذا زوينا هايورا قبل أمتن عطوراي زودة من تلاي خمسة شنة. وجو Mid-America Furniture هدية اتلو خسيل الرابع جورا. إنزونيتون Furniture قتشل بيت الديوخر ماسيتون قانيتون خراي خا coffee table ين خا mattress. هذا غزة ماسيتون قانيتون خا خراي خا TV stand. قتشل ختنا وشالو. أي ست لخا إلى سدانتا وشابرتا وتشتزاونا أي ست بتقانيتون قدية mattress خراي ين free. وإذن آتيتون قم Mid-America Furniture تيمون نغزيمون شلو نو sectionals. أخدية sectional لخا ماسيتون شخلي بيتون لو مت أرخد بيتون.
إيمان وايلة أكسيدنت اتنرابة ناشة ليعطي متبصل قد شكلي. اتلا نسيانة بدنا كيسس injury law و بيالباية قريمخ. إن آتن ينكل بتت بيتا خزموخن يطانة اتلوخن بوقارة مخبرون المنيان التلفون 8 أربع شوا وشو 8 تري وشو 5 خا إشتا يعني توكن بيت injuryrights.com. شمي إلى توني كالوغراكس كيام زمن لشان خلية يما.
شلام عليكم. أنا ريبيكا سايمون من جيبة يداء شميران قابلوكم ممشينا. همزمتن وديوب دوية من طلاقاناي قد خيشنا آل أطرا. همزمتن دوية بلشانة إنجلس. Hello, my name is Rebecca Simon. On behalf of Shamiran Media, I welcome all our viewers. Today, we have 3 guests who have traveled to Atra, Iraq, through Gishru. Gishru is an organization that plans annual travels to various cities in Atra to establish connectivity between the Assyrians in the diaspora and Assyrians in Iraq to foster educational, cultural, archeological, and other relations. Our guests today are Sarah Bennett, Esther Elia, and Joseph Snell. Shlama alochun and welcome to Shamiran Media.
Shlama.
Shlama.
Shlama. The 3 of you have something in common. And it's astounding that all 3 of you are only part Assyrian. Many of us believe that if someone is part Assyrian, that their Assyrianism is kind of on a diminished status. I greatly appreciate you for proving us wrong. And with that, welcome again. And I would like you to briefly answer 4 questions so our audience will get to know you a little bit before we start our interview. Please let us know which of the parent is Assyrian and the other parent where they're from, where you were born, where you reside, and what do you do for a living. 4 questions. We'll start with Esther.
Hi, I'm Esther Elia. My father is Assyrian. His family is from Urmia, the villages of Ada and Chorbash, and my mother was born in California, but her ancestors are originally from Ireland. I was born in Turlock, California, and raised there and lived there for a long time. And now I'm a student getting my Master's of Fine Arts at the University of New Mexico. So I'm living in Albuquerque right now.
And what do you do?
I'm a visual artist, painting and sculpture, and am getting my education at the moment.
And as I understand, the beautiful painting in the background behind you is done by you. It's your work of art. Can you explain to us a little bit what those 3 people represent?
Yeah, these are from my father's mother's side of the family. The last name is Warda, and so this is like their first portrait in America. It's taken from a picture that we have, and it came from this series that I started a couple of years ago of painting family photos as a way of feeling connected to my Assyrian heritage. And so a couple of them also have thoughts of mine associated with them. And so this is a picture or a painting of my ancestors. And at the time, it was when I painted it, it was like kind of at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. And I was in Ireland and studying abroad, and a comment was made to me as I was in Europe that the refugees were ruining Sweden and were ruining Europe. And so part of this series was painting the refugee members of my family and making a series of paintings and putting on them saying these are refugees and we have contributed and we are beautiful, and this is where I come from and I'm part Irish. So it was just like my own way of like reclaiming the Assyrian identity and pushing back against anti-refugee sentiment.
With that explanation, now I hear the voice on that painting as well as the image. Thank you for that explanation. Sarah, please answer the 4 questions.
Yes, hello. Thanks so much for having us on. I'm excited for this. So my name is Sarah. I originally was born outside of Chicago. I grew up in Aurora, Illinois, but my Assyrian family, which is on my mom's side, is from Albany Park. So shout out that area. My dad is from Minnesota. He's mostly German, but he's got some Irish, Scottish in him as well. He's a fun guy. And my parents met in Chicago actually too. So that's where they stay. My Assyrian family is originally from Turlock as well, which is kind of fun because Esther and I connected on that on the trip. Maybe we'll get into that. But my grandma is the only one that moved from that area to Chicago. So it's kind of just fun to trace that back and make those connections through the years. But I'm based right outside of New York in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I work in real estate technology.
And you're married to a?
Norwegian, 100% Norwegian.
All right.
He's a great
You have an interesting story about your, I believe, great-great-grandfather. Can you just briefly tell us who your famous and really historical figure? Who is your great-great-grandfather?
I'd be happy to. So growing up in Chicago, so I grew up in the suburbs, like I mentioned, but my mom made a big effort to make sure that we stayed connected to our Assyrian identity, as well as both my grandma and my great-grandmother. And my great-grandmother, her name was Clara. She was the oldest daughter of Isaac Adams, who actually led the first mass migration of Assyrians out of Urmia over the course of roughly 10 years. I forget the exact stats, but anywhere from 30 to 60 families. He helped foster that passage. And the last trip he did was around 1913, right before the war and a lot of the massacres we know that were taking place. So as things were getting more tense throughout the years, he really made a point to start learning English, going over to the States, kind of going all over and raising funds throughout these different various speaking engagements he would go on. There's a lot of different ways I could take this story, but there's actually a lawsuit that my family won against the Turkish government, and the money that they won from that, they used to take families out of Urmia and help them settle in North Battleford as well as Turlock. So it's kind of fun. I saw my great uncle over the weekend, and he was reminding me of some of these stories. This was his grandfather. And he said at that time, there were 2 people in Turlock that had a phone, my great-great-grandfather and the mayor. So it's just kind of fun. But I grew up hearing a lot of these stories and hearing especially stories about Iran and about Persia at the time, right? And then just associating with that. So that kind of lit the fire with wanting to go back to that region someday and just always being curious. And yeah, upon landing on the trip, I guess it was a month ago now, it was just a very emotional experience. You know, all of those stories leading up to that moment, I would say.
Sarah, as a mother, I love giving advices. Even though you're not my daughter, I'll give you an advice. Right,
Please.
right. Write everything you hear. The
Yeah.
history is in the hearts and minds of our grandparents, and I don't know, parents and uncles and everybody. Write them. The
Absolutely.
smallest thing that may seem insignificant to you may have historical value. So please, please write those great stories. And I also know that your great grandfather authored 2 books. Would you please tell us which books they are? And they're still on sale. They're
Yeah,
still being
absolutely. So
published.
the first, yeah, it's crazy. The first, and we have a few originals at home, which are just insane to see and touch. It feels like I'm in a museum sometimes. But the first is called Persia by a Persian by Isaac Adams, and the second was called Darkness and Daybreak. Both are written by him, penned by him, and I would say there's a lot of similar themes through both of those books, but Persia by a Persian focuses more on what it was like living in that region at the time. It's more of an educational text. And Darkness and Daybreak is about, dealing with the Kurdish and Turkish raids, how Assyrians were persecuted in that area, his whole trip on bringing people over, and his faith in God and how that carried him through. So again, a lot of similar themes. If you buy both, you'll notice that. Sometimes I think I was joking with you about this. I'm like, did he copy and paste certain chapters in each of them? But high level, those are the differences.
No copyright issues. Don't worry about that.
That's right.
Well, it's wonderful to read a book like that by someone who lived it, who was there.
Yeah.
It wasn't a research. He lived it. He has the first eyewitness account of what happened to us. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And last but not least, our only gentleman on the platform, Mr. Joseph Snell. You please give us the answers to the 4 questions so the audience will get familiarized with you.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having us. I think this is important to talk about these things. First, you mentioned at the top about being only part Assyrian. I take offense to that because I think you can be full Assyrian and full American. And sometimes we hear in these interviews and these conversations, you only part something and it seems to diminish it a little bit. So I feel I'm Assyrian. I also feel like I'm American. I was born in Indiana. My dad is from Detroit, but his family traces their families back to Germany and England and Ireland. My parents met in Chicago, and that's where most of my mom's family is in now, even though some of them are in Texas. I covered the Middle East and North Africa for a publication called Al Monitor, and I'm based today in DC.
I know, Joe, that you have a website now that you're working on. At least that was true as of last September when I spoke to you last. Give us the name of the publication and tell us what you write about there.
Yeah, so it's so I work. I'll monitor as my full-time position, and then when I have time after work or on the weekends, I work on a publication called the Assyrian Journal. So I try to cover the global Assyrian community in my apartment in DC. So I'll cover stories about the homeland. I'll cover stories about the diaspora. It's through arts and culture. It's through profiles on different people. It's an important project, I think.
Have you published anything about your current Gishru trip? I know that this Gishru trip was your 3rd one. Have you written anything about this trip?
Gishru trip and my 3rd to Iraq, and we published on Al Monitor a story about Gishru, and then we have people actually writing stories now about their experience going to different villages that their families are from, and I'm really excited to publish those.
Okay. Now, Joseph Snell, I'm sorry if I offended you, but
no, it wasn't
I said I know.
Yeah.
I said ahead of time that I stand corrected, and I and some other people, there is no part Assyrian. It's how your spirit operates, and you guys are Assyrians, and therefore I will ask you, why Gishru? Why did you want to go to Atra? I'll start with Sarah. Please tell us why. What was this urge to go to Atra and visit?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, I think. So it's been fun to process that in a different meaning or light, if you will, coming back from the trip, thinking about, okay, why did I decide to make this jump? But I think the easy answer is I followed them on Instagram for a few years. I'm friends with Susie from ahead of time. So she's always encouraged me to take the jump. Right. But the deeper meaning is, like I said, I grew up with my Assyrian, my Nana, and my great grandma. My great grandma died when she was she was a month shy of 101. I was 22 years old. So I spent my whole life with her, hearing her stories. She was a great storyteller. She also was the person in the family that was running around with the camera, right, making sure that she was capturing moments. And she was very proud to be Assyrian. She was very proud of her father and, the impact that he made on our community. So I think that laid the foundation. I was just always very curious. Also, my dad is not Assyrian, but he's a big traveler. So I think the very first time we left the country, even, I don't know, I was like 11 years old and we went to Africa. And, it's just stuff like that. So I've always had the general travel bug, but I've always just thought of, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria, present day, right, as just this magical place that I feel connected to, but I didn't really know what that was. I've told this story before on the trip that, growing up, your mom would pick you up from school and kids at school would say, oh, is your mom Spanish? Is she Italian? Is she Mexican? Like trying to make the connection. No, she's Assyrian. What's that? Right. So she always taught us how to answer that. The funny question or the funny answer to that would be, oh, well, have you seen VeggieTales? Jonah, right? Those evil people that he was trying to save. So that was the elementary reason. But, you're a kid, you're trying to figure out, okay, I can't point to a map where this is, but I know in my family what this means and the stories, and that's important. So I don't know. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a loaded question. I think I'm even probably going to have a different way to answer this at the end of this interview, but I just really always felt that call. And it's kind of funny too, when I was taking off, I had a layover in Istanbul and my mom sent me a text and she had no idea probably what time it was that we were about to take off, but saying, okay, I think this is kind of crazy and really beautiful that you're going on this journey. You felt called to go back to this land, just like our grandfather felt called, to take people from this land. She said it in a much more eloquent way, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just something that's always been in my heart, in short. I'm rambling now.
Wonderful. Joe? Why this trip? I know it's your second Gishru trip and third Atra trip. Sorry I misspoke.
Oh, that's fine. My reasons for going in 2019 for the first time are a bit different than my reasons for going this trip. So when I went in 2019, I wanted to connect to my roots. I wanted to understand a lot of the stories better that I'd been hearing and see it firsthand. This time was a little bit different for a few different reasons. So first, any chance I can get to go to Iraq, I'll take, because more and more I go to the country, I fall more in love with it. I took this trip as a bit of a trial run. So I covered the Middle East and North Africa for my position at work. And I wanted to see if it's something I could do more long-term, being based on the ground and reporting. I think there's an authenticity to storytelling when you do it in person versus thousands of miles away. There were a lot of stories that I was hearing about that I wanted to understand a little bit better. The land grab issue was one, the Turkish bombings in the north. Being there and talking to people and understanding it in a way that you can't either through phone calls or social media posts, that kind of thing. And then every time I go, it tends to put things in a bit more perspective. And if you hear the Assyrian podcast episode that just came out this week, one of our participants was talking about this. There's a lot of times we'll be here and there's a lot of like bickering and fighting between different things. And then you go to the homeland and you see these issues in front of you and you realize what you're working towards, and a lot of other things just fall by the wayside. You start to realize this is what's important, and a lot of these other things are, we just need to kind of focus on what we're doing. So those are the big reasons I go.
Can you think of one story that when you encountered an Atra, you said, aha, this is really an interesting story. I'm going to follow up on it and I'm going to write about it?
There's a few. The Turkish bombings in the north are a story we've all heard, but I think it's a story that's not being reported enough. And I think it's a story that's only going to continue to grow. And when you talk to people in Nala, so we were in Nala for a few days, when you talk to those people and you hear their perspective about some of these bombings that are near their houses, or there was a soccer team that a bomb fell about 20 meters away from their bus, it hits a little bit closer to home. So I think that's a story that's only going to grow in significance, and it's sadly underreported.
It is sad. Esther. Why Gishru? Why Atra?
Yeah, I think I'm third generation Assyrian born outside of the homeland, and I think for a while, as I was starting to choose my Assyrian identity and choosing to claim it and make art about it, and I don't know, take that leap. I became really, really interested in how the Assyrian identity functions outside of the homeland. We've created these communities, for example, in Turlock, where I grew up, and there were just so many places that we were holding on to our culture, and like I had access to spaces. Like I did a series of paintings about the Assyrian grocery store, just like the products in the Assyrian grocery store that were telling the story of like where we're from, our history, and were literal objects taken from the homeland and brought here, like us, you know. And so I think as I continued on this journey of figuring out what our culture looks like outside of the homeland, it became more and more important to know what it looks like within the homeland, because there are really interesting dynamics when you're like taken in and transplanted in another place. There are certain things that freeze, I think, culturally or like linguistically, that don't progress in the same way as they do back home. And so I wanted to see that, I think. And it felt, when I discovered Gishru, it became, I had a sense of urgency that I needed to do this. I needed to experience what it looked like to be Assyrian within our indigenous lands, you know?
And when you were there, you accomplished an amazing task that was asked of you. And you know what I'm talking about. Could you elaborate on that and tell us how it was that you started doing this project of painting a mural? Tell us which city and how it came about.
So about a week and a half before the trip, I was contacted by Susie, and she looped in Asher Kasrani, who lives in Nala, and basically they said, we want you to do a mural. And I froze, and I was like, this is the high point of my career. This is the biggest thing that I will ever do. And it was just like, I don't know, that they would ask me and give me that opportunity felt like such a testament to the journey that I had been on of claiming being Assyrian and trying to contribute to our community in any way that I could. And so this was like the big moment, and my mind went blank. And I was like, I don't know, what am I supposed to paint, like for the most meaningful mural of my life, you know? And so I went on the trip, and Susie had said something like, you know, just experience Atra and images will come to you. And I was like, that makes me so uncomfortable because I am a planner and I write things down. And the last mural I did, I had a year to plan and execute.
And this is how long before the trip? Shortly before. How long before the trip?
About 2 weeks.
Okay. Much less than a year.
Yes. before I have to put paint to wall. So they sent me a picture. They tried to send me the dimensions, but they were in meters, and I was just so frazzled. I couldn't visualize anything. And it was like this gate with this glorious sky, and I was like, where is this? What is around it? Like, how can I make something meaningful in this place I've never been? I'm experiencing my homeland for the first time. It was just crazy. And so anyway, I decided to take it back to the land. And so I've been fairly, as I know all Assyrians are, fairly obsessed with our ancient art and reliefs. I know we're all going to the museums at all times to view our artwork. And I think it just felt really, really appropriate that as Gishru, means bridge, and it's this bridge to the homeland, it's also going both ways. We're bringing things to the homeland as well with us. And so I felt like this was my opportunity to bring back some of those images that I had seen in diaspora of these artifacts that had been, uprooted, and I had been uprooted. And so on the mural, there's imagery pretty much exclusively with my own twist of lions as seen, taken from our reliefs, and like tassels on the garments of our kings and our priests, and image, like symbolism of Ishtar and Shamash and Sin. And it just felt like this, it ended up being a really, really beautiful experience of like, not only is this my personal contribution, but I can bring back some of the imagery and put it back in the land it belongs in, that it was born out of, and I can do it with not only Gishru participants, but with locals. They were around and they were helping. And it was, we had like half a day to do it. And I don't know, there were certain moments, I think this is what I want to say, just like one of the core experiences of this trip was, so I don't speak Assyrian. I'm trying to learn. It's a very slow process. But that felt like, it didn't feel like a hindrance throughout the trip. I didn't feel like I missed anything, but it did feel like a barrier as far as connecting with locals. And
Why is that?
I felt self-conscious. And I think there's a little bit of shame that I'm still dealing with around language and not knowing it. And I'm just trying to, fully process, like, I think the morning that my family had to leave, and that the thing that got kind of pushed away was our language, in part because I know my grandparents thought it would make my father safer and more successful. And so I mourn that as kind of the inheritor of that history and of our struggle that resulted in that. And so anyway, I was self-conscious whenever someone didn't speak English, and I just felt the weight of that history, I think, every time, of being like, there's a reason that I don't speak, and it's because of trauma and really, really horrendous and horrific historical events, And so in that way, this painting, and painting for me generally, has been like my way of communicating. When I don't have Assyrian words, I have Assyrian visual imagery, and I have Assyrian faces, and it is my love letter, and it is my way of saying, this is who I am as an Assyrian person, even though I don't have the language for that. And so when locals were helping us out, it felt like this beautiful, beautiful moment where I could finally communicate without self-consciousness and say, this is who I am. I want to get to know you. And it's through us both painting the imagery that belongs in this land and is both our cultural heritage, like for both of us, you know.
And in your mind, you made up the lack of speaking the Assyrian language by leaving something for them that is so truly Assyrian. What medium did you use?
I brought some acrylic paint, and I didn't know what the mural was going to look like, so I just kind of guessed and brought the primary colors. And then I also wasn't quite sure how much paint we would need, so we also bought some enamel house paint while in Alkosh, like the day before we went to Nala.
And you mentioned that some Gishru participants and some locals helped you paint it. Did any of our guests, Sarah or Joe, help you with the paint?
If she'll claim us.
Yeah.
Both.
Do we have anybody's signature on that mural?
You have one.
Could I add something to what you just said?
Surely,
actually?
yes, please.
This as you were saying it. So it's kind of funny again how all of us were drawn to this trip and to go to the homeland in different ways. But so years ago, I think it was maybe in 2018 or 2019, Esther, correct me, but the Diaspora in Bloom, that art exhibition, right, that was in California. So this was, do you remember if it was 2018 or 2019? Maybe it doesn't matter. But
I think it's 2018.
Before the pandemic, okay?
Yeah. So
it was 2019. It was after my first Gishru trip.
Okay. 2019.
But I just mention it because I was kind of, at a place where I was starting to dig back in and like trying to reconnect with the community. And I found this online. So I started following it, right? And I got connected. I think because I did a donation, I received a postcard. And the postcard that I got saying thank you was like a print of Esther's work. So I just put it on my fridge, didn't think anything of it. And then when we got on the trip, Esther and I ended up being roommates for like 4 or 5 nights during the trip, and actually during the time right before we went to Nala. So even I was honored, like full circle, to A, make that connection, B, meet the woman that was on my fridge, but then also be with you the night before as you were planning. And you don't give yourself enough credit. I mean, she sat down and she kind of let everything flow, and you're a rock star. You really just did a wonderful job. So give yourself
Esther was a bit of a celebrity wherever we went.
Yes, she was.
And she hides that status.
She hides it. Mm-hmm.
Esther, how possible is it that this mural is going to last for some time and the elements won't affect it?
I think super possible. I think it's going to be up for a really, really long time. And, if the elements are absolutely crazy, then I would be honored for it to be painted by a new Assyrian artist over.
It's a good excuse to go back.
Yeah, every year she'll have to go back to retouch it.
Yeah.
How large is the mural?
I finally got dimensions in feet. It was like 12 feet high and 30 feet long, 20 feet long, 25, something.
A giant Ishtar. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Joe, what cities did you guys travel to?
We went to a lot of cities and villages. Started in Erbil. We were in Dohuk for a while. We were in Al-Qush. Some members of our group went to Tel Kep. We were in Nala.
Why not everybody go? Did you separate into groups?
There were a few days where we had, I guess there were breaks, and people got a chance to go to different places. Some people stayed in the cities where we're at. Some people had a chance to break off and go to different places that weren't in the itinerary that they'd wanted to go to. One of the places I was really happy to go to, I was waiting for years to go, and we finally got a chance to go, was Diana, because that's where my grandmother's from, and I got a chance to FaceTime my mom and some of my family while I was there, and they liked it. Yeah.
Now, if you go to a country, travel to a foreign land, and you go from city to city, you will see different cultures, different sceneries, different foods. Did you experience that in Atra? Did villages have their own air, their own specific and unique feel?
Yeah, I would say that there was some of that. There was, but at the same time, you felt at home wherever you were at right away. Um, I remember getting off the bus in Diana, for example. We went to the school there, and you get off the bus and everybody greets you like they've known you for years. And I think that's a feeling that I felt, and in each place we went, and I think a lot of people on the Gishru troop felt as well. You get off the bus and you meet people for the first time, and you feel like you've known them your whole life.
Even in the
Yeah.
States or anywhere else, you meet an Assyrian on the street,
Totally.
there's an instant connection. You don't feel like they're strangers. You feel like you've known them for a long time just because they're Assyrians. So,
Yeah.
so these people expect you to be there every year. Different groups, but Gishru participants, right?
I think I don't know if expect is the right word, but they look forward to seeing us a lot and staying in touch with us too. And that's another big part of this trip that I'd like to point out. So this trip is about going there, but it's about establishing relationships, and then we bring those relationships home, and we stay in touch with these people, and just check in, and they check in with us, and it's about developing community. And when we go back to talking about what it feels like to have family, feel like we have a global family.
Mhm.
Sarah, what was the highlight of the trip for you?
Oh man, you're hitting me with the hard-hitting questions. So many highlights. I don't know. I mean, something I just, yeah, to add to what Joe was just saying, I really felt at home there. And then even for me, a way to describe it is it's like it was dusting off an old book almost. It's always been there, that connection and with my heritage, but to actually feel it and to feel at home there was just, I don't know, it truly, I am at a loss for words. It felt magical. I think it was really interesting too because growing up, I always associated with, you know, Persian identity or like Iranian identity, even like under the Assyrian umbrella, right? Like I never thought of us as being from Iraq, but then learning more about even like family history, how the Assyrians that were in that region came from Iraq at some point. So it was just really beautiful. When we landed, I just started crying on the plane. I felt it. And all throughout the trip, you know, I never once felt unsafe. I never felt unwelcome. I think it was really beautiful how our team connected too. All of us are so different. We have different Assyrian backgrounds, different Assyrian family, different languages that we speak in our host countries, right? So, but everyone got along really well, was very supportive of each other and the journey that we were on, so to say, which I think too just added to the experience. So, I don't know how exactly I would answer that. It's just so multifaceted, which I think is a really big blessing. But the work that this trip does in connecting and bridging people, right, or bridging the homeland, is just super powerful. It's really hard to describe. And since being home too, it's been hard to describe. Everyone's like, "How was your trip?" Or when I get back to work, everyone's like, "How was your vacation?" I'm like, "I was not on a vacation. I was on this trip of a lifetime." It's really hard to describe, but having this community too, and having people like Joe and Esther, and now you, that I can chat about this with, I don't know, it's just really powerful.
That's
How
something I
was
want to piggyback
Yes,
off of as
yes,
well, if
Joe.
you don't mind. Something about this trip that I think is important is it gives the idea that it's so much easier to travel to Iraq than people realize,
Hmm.
and it's much safer and it's much more modern. This is something that people can travel to the north much more than just like once in a lifetime kind of things. Um, it's easier to travel there than a lot of people imagine.
Hmm.
Was the virus, the pandemic, an issue during your trip? Was this trip any different than the ones previous to the pandemic? Joe, you would
Uh,
know that.
yeah, 2019 wasn't a thing. Last year was a lot a lot harder to get in than this year. This year we were still tracking the regulations right before we left. And in fact, right when we were flying out, I had to rush and get another COVID test because I didn't accept the COVID test I took. It's about an hour before my flight left, hour or two, but we made it work. But it was a little bit less, but we were still tracking that stuff pretty closely.
Esther, what did you find culturally different among the people in Atra than the Assyrians here? I know we've probably a little Americanized, and I presume that you had Assyrians from other nations participating in this Gishru trip. Did you see any unique aspects of our culture in Atra?
You know, I'm sure there were. I think it was the first time I felt completely surrounded by Assyrian culture. And it was, I think I expected to find more differences. And it was, what made the biggest impression was that we have maintained the food somehow. It's like the same. I'm assuming a lot of the language is similar. There was just, and like, I don't know, there's been so much that's been maintained within Diaspora that everything felt so familiar and yet just like scaled up 1,000%. And as the trip went on, it was just like, wow, I've never been in a place where I've loved all the food because it reminds me of home food. Or like, wow, I've never been in a place where I am looking at faces of strangers and being like, these people feel familiar. These people look like my family. So it was harder to pick out differences because I was so kind of bathed with the familiarity.
Where did you eat? Did you eat at people's homes? Did you eat at Assyrian restaurants? Were there Assyrian restaurants there?
Did we eat at Assyrian restaurants? There were many instances where Assyrians made food for us, and like as we traveled from village to village, and so that was the best food.
Church lunch was the best.
Church lunch.
Yes.
What was it? What did you have?
Everything.
All the dolma was my favorite. That was like my plate was full every time, but everything was amazing.
All the rices were present.
Yeah.
Wish I was there.
Yeah.
We'll bring you back a plate. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I want to have the plate over there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, we are going to take a sponsor's break, and we are going to show Esther's video of her mural, and then we'll come back. Stay tuned.
It's early in the morning in the Nala Valley of Northern Iraq, and Esther Elia is already hard at work. Elia is an Assyrian artist based in New Mexico. This month, she traveled over 7,000 miles, commissioned to produce a mural at the entrance of a new Assyrian village called Mata Awahatha, or Village of the Ancestors. Elia's grandparents fled Ormi in present-day Iran around 1917 during the Armenian, Assyrian, and Greek genocide. Elia is one of the first in her family to return to the region. In the Diaspora, she's dedicated her artwork to documenting the contemporary Assyrian experience. So it was important to her, she said, to return to where her family was from and paint this mural to reclaim her heritage.
I can bring back with me the imagery that I've seen within Diaspora of the things that belonged here in the first place. And feels like a full circle of all the work I've been doing has like led to this result that I never ever would have seen coming.
The Nala Valley in northern Iraq is comprised of 8 Assyrian villages and up to 800 people. That number has declined dramatically in recent years as families face mounting pressures to leave. Some in the diaspora return to visit, hoping to learn more about their heritage and where their families come from.
Thinking about all the art we've seen, all the history we've seen in our land, being able to contribute to it in this way is one of the greatest things I've experienced.
Over the course of 8 hours, with the help of some friends, Elia completed her mural. Today, Its brightly colored images of figures associated with the goddess Ishtar and healer Shamash greet those that live in the valley and welcome those that visit. A piece of Elia will now always live with her Assyrian community in Nala.
Finding out that, some of my Urmia neighbors, some of my Urmia friends of relations, or even could be relations, may have settled also here, and that there's a Urmi population in Nala is like extra meaningful, because it does feel like having a piece of me to commune with them is just beautiful. It's really wonderful.
Assyrian Foundation of America was established in 1964 as a 501c3 nonprofit in California to help needy Assyrians around the world support Assyrian education and preserve and promote the Assyrian language and culture. Since 1977, Nimbe magazine has been published under the auspices of the Assyrian Foundation of America and distributed around the world. Every day since inception, Assyrian Foundation of America has been a window of hope to keep Assyria alive. For more info, please visit AssyrianFoundation.org.
Welcome back. We're going to continue talking to our three guests about their trip to Atra. Joe, what was the sense of people about whether they wanted to stay in Atra or come here? There's a faction of Assyrians in the West who believes we should get everybody out, bring them here to safety. And there's another faction who says those are our ancestral lands. We need to keep ownership of them. We need to leave the people there, help them to foster our cultural uniqueness, our language, our archaeology, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. We may have a country. What was the sense of people over there from your conversations with them?
This question can be answered in an encounter I had with a brother and sister who the brother and he said his dad were very adamant about leaving because they wanted to find more opportunities outside of the country. And then his sister and the mother and their other sister were adamant about staying because they felt a connection to the land. And I think that sometimes we come into these places with ideas and projects and try to impose without really listening to what the people need. And I think the most important thing we can do is give an opportunity for people to make the decisions they feel are best for their family. So if somebody decides that it's best for them and their family to leave the country, they have the support and the opportunity to do that. And those that want to stay, stay. And yeah, I think it's important first to listen before we go in and do some of these things.
How easy is it for them to migrate to the U.S. or the West?
I'm not an expert on that. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I think each person has a different story based on the work they do and the relationships they have. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that.
It's sad when there is a division among family members on where to live. If both sides get what they want, then they won't be together. That is really sad, and that is the price we pay for a Middle East that's not generally safe. Do people express a sense of safety, or did they always feel some danger looming somehow, somewhere, sometime in the future?
Well, I think dangers take the shape in different forms. So it might not be physical danger, but there's a lot of like other types of like harassment and things like that going on. Like, for example, I had a friend that was going to the Khamnisan celebration in Asher, and they were stopped at the checkpoint, and she told the guards that she was going to the Assyrian New Year celebration, and he said the Assyrians don't exist anymore. They're like, what is this celebration you're going to? And so that's it's not a physical danger, but if you're surrounded by that all the time and you're fighting for like who you are, then that becomes a danger in a different shape.
Esther, I saw some of your photos with ladies wearing these amazingly ornate dresses, headdresses. Did that in any way inspire you on your artwork?
Yes. Yes. I am very inspired. I think it was really, really interesting seeing where our cultural clothing was at generally, and getting to, partake in that was something I'd never done and never had access to. And so, and within like this really large group of women, Assyrian women who had dressed in traditional clothing. So yeah, the whole thing was inspiring.
I was personally stunned that day how many people, like the parade, like there was just waves of people. That was really encouraging for me to see, honestly. It was really beautiful. There was just thousands of Assyrians, it felt like. And there was at one point towards the end where we were walking up a hill and I just looked back and it was like the whole street, for as far as I could see, everyone was dressed in traditional clothing from their village. And it was just really encouraging to see.
Did you get any data on how many Assyrians are left in Iraq?
Joe, did you get any numbers?
Maybe Joe would know that.
I think it's around, that's a good question. Not sure. I think around 200,000. I'd have to double check.
Significantly less than the
totally.
Iran-Iraq war. Significantly less.
Well, and even since 2014, I heard a lot of people talking about with ISIS, which was really just crazy to think about how relatively recent. It's just insane. It's really.
And the issue too is a lot of the challenges that are pushing these people out of the country are still there, and they're not being addressed by a lot of the authorities in charge. These Turkish bombings in the north are pressuring a lot of people in these villages to leave, and there's no pushback on that. So a lot of these people are put in very in situations where they're encouraged to leave.
I don't know if Assyrians have the numbers or the money or the power to do the pushback. It looks like the big powers, if they are our allies, they're the ones who need to do the pushing backs. That's unfortunate that our plight remains to be unseen, unheard. That's my beef with the West. Sarah, did you visit any children's schools?
We did. And that was another aspect that, despite everything, all the realities that we've heard about at home, that how hard life can be there, I personally going to the schools and just seeing young kids and like hearing them learn in Assyrian, speak in Assyrian, like the math lesson. I forget, Esther, Joe, if you were in the same class as me, that was just the cutest thing. And like hearing them answer in Assyrian, that just gave me a lot of hope. And I know that a lot of that comes from like different various Assyrian, Assyrian aid, et cetera, like groups in the West that support them. I don't know. So yeah, we saw a lot of schools. I think every village we went to a school, and just seeing their smiling faces, I don't know, it truly encouraged me a lot.
Were they were the children dressed nicely? Did they have nice clean clothes? And did they I'm not trying to offend anyone. I just want to get a full and complete picture of the well-being of the children and how they can wear nice clothes and have books and have desks and chairs that they can sit comfortably on at school. Do they have computers? Did you get any of that information?
I think, at least for me, and I'll let the other two chime in, but there were some of us that were joking, saying these kids are better dressed than I was when I was that age. Like, they look cuter, they're more stylish. Yeah, no, and I think I understand the perspective and like what you're trying to describe right now, but I think it's important to talk about because especially people in the West have this perception of Iraq or of the Middle East. And, we have the opportunity now that we've been there to say, okay, here's what's not true about this. This is what I've seen, just kind of helping frame that narrative. So I think it is important to talk about. But to answer your question, yes, they were adorable. They were clean. I personally, I went to a math class. I didn't see any computers, but I think I actually heard a story about a different group that had helped fund a computer lab. I don't know, Esther, Joe, if you heard about that.
Yeah, it was Chris and Rana out of Detroit. They actually used, it's a great story. They used, instead of spending money on their wedding for things like flowers and things like that, they used all the money to build this computer lab. And I'm blanking where it was at, but yeah, it's a great story. It's an example of how you can use funds here to, like in some things that might seem a bit excessive and use them to build a computer lab. I do want to jump on your point as well, Sarah. It's so much more modern than we understand here. And we talk about this perception in the West and being silent and the pushback. I think a lot of it isn't malicious. I think a lot of it's just ignorance. So then our role becomes to show these pictures that we took and show these videos and educate people. I mean, the number of times we've had conversations where people say, I didn't know the Assyrians still exist, or, oh, your family's Christian, when did they convert? Like, this is just out of a place of ignorance. And then we have these conversations and we show these things, and I think that's where you start to educate, and that's where the perception starts to change.
Esther, do you know where the kids who finish school and high school go after that to colleges, universities? Are there colleges and universities where the Assyrians live in northern Iraq?
Yes, we saw a couple universities. It was really hard to gauge exactly what the deal was. I know people were going and getting degrees, and then kind of there weren't jobs is kind of the what impression that I got. I don't know if Joe and Sarah can add to that.
Yeah, I heard a little bit of that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The jobs was an issue. There's also another issue. So in the villages, this is somebody I spoke with in 2019. It was an older gentleman, and he was talking to me about when he was younger. It was him and 5 or 6 siblings. And when you're living in the villages and you want to go to university, you have to travel outside the village, and you usually stay with a family member or a friend that lives in the city. And that's why like transportation and like into these villages and coming in and out is so important. So a lot of these people can get education, and it became difficult for a lot of these families to go to the cities and to house people. So a lot of them at the time didn't get a chance to go to the university. I think that's changed a little bit, but it's still, there are a lot of impediments. I mean, you look at a road going into Nala, for example, and it's unpaved. And when you start to peel back everything that impacts, it starts to hit a little bit closer to home. So not only is it just people that are working in the city, but it's affecting people that want to go into the city every day or every month to get an education.
Recently, the road into Nala was paved, and I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think that it saves like 30 to 45 minutes now on the trek. And I think that the reason why that was done was because of like lobbying efforts or just folks being persistent and making sure that got done. So then there's, hopeful stories about that where, the community's actually able to enact some change. I remember folks talking about that.
Yeah.
And Esther, were you going to add something?
To the original question, there seems to be opportunity. There seems to be higher education available. But yeah, as far as opportunity after that, I don't know. It seemed a little more difficult.
And Joe, why are there not enough jobs? Is it because there aren't enough people there? Why not enough jobs? Do you know what the unemployment rate is over there?
I'm not sure about the unemployment rate. There are jobs. Don't get me wrong. It's not like there's like a huge crisis about some of these jobs, but there are a lack of jobs in certain sectors. And this goes back to, bigger government issues. And you talk about the federal government not being able to pass the state's bill, and without not passing that bill means that the budget hasn't been allocated yet. So a lot of people are waiting for salaries, and a lot of companies are waiting for this money to come in so they can build these places up. But yeah, it's a state issue.
How did you communicate with them if you don't speak Assyrian? And I assume they're not fluent in English. How did you guys communicate?
There was some English that was shared. And I don't know, some of the kids who, we had people with us who were educated within Iraq that spoke beautiful English, and that were like our guides. And so, and then they would translate. And most everyone on the trip did speak Assyrian, and so someone could translate at any point.
Okay, so you were never
I do want
lost.
to chime in. These kids speak 3 or 4 languages at a young age. They put us to shame, and their English is pretty good too. Esther, you mentioned this, I think, a little bit about connecting to people without having the language, and a little bit of a barrier there. I noticed that too, not in a sense that they didn't speak English well, but in a sense that it wasn't their first or second language. So it wasn't the one they were most comfortable with. Or third in some cases too. Yeah, Jesus, I feel horrible now. But in that sense, when we were talking to them, you could tell that they were more comfortable talking in another language, and that's when it becomes easier to have a conversation with. That's what, like, somebody that spoke Assyrian, it'd be easier to bridge that barrier. They'd feel more comfortable. I think they open up a little bit more.
Sarah, what did you bring with you as souvenir?
Oh my goodness, I brought a lot. Okay, where do I start? I got these earrings. I got some silver earrings. I bought some gold. I got my mom a ring. What didn't I get is a better question. Some scarves, some tahini from Nala.
Homemade?
Yeah. Esther, maybe you're better versed to speak to this, because I know that there's a business kind of behind what Usher's doing, but I'm not, or Joe. Are you guys able to speak on that at all? If not, I'm just going to say it's delicious, and they had all of us take a jar home. Maybe we'll follow up on that.
Did your dollar, Sarah, go a long way in Atra?
Yeah, absolutely.
Big purchasing power?
Yeah, I kept running out of money, though. I had to keep going to the ATM. I was having too much fun.
They have ATMs too. See, all we see here from Middle East is destruction, ISIS, tanks, soldiers, burns, fire, killing, blood, bombing. And so when you say ATM, it's like, really, they have ATMs, and that's my fault. I should be better educated on what my Atra has. So you did go to the ATM a lot.
Because of the images we've been exposed to, there was no way we would know that, It's not even us having a lack of education. It's just having no access.
Mhm. Yeah, and so when all of us were there, I mean, I was going crazy on my Instagram still now, like trying to post photos. And a lot of my friends and family are like, "Oh my goodness, you're in Iraq? Like, I thought that this was a joke that you were going there. It looks like you're in New York." And you know what I mean? And
Unbelievable.
I'm sure that sounds kind of offensive at first to folks that are there, as it maybe should. But like we were talking about earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm just really passionate about helping reframe that narrative and saying, yeah, I had amazing sushi over there, believe it or not.
Ah,
There were good cocktails there if you're into that. I mean, the food was amazing. It was just beautiful. Oh, actually,
that's
fun fact, I got my nails done over there. This was 3 weeks ago now. Look how good they still look. This is
that's
one of the best manicures I've ever gotten.
that's
So
wonderful.
I'm curious.
Well, I hear, in closing, I hear that after you come back, there is a sense of activism in you, Joe, in a journalistic way, and you too. What do you think your really mission is from now on to do something for Atra, for your people, culturally, artistically, in any way you can? I'll start with Esther.
Um, yeah, I definitely it was a very illuminating experience, probably life changing, and I was already committed to making art for and about the Assyrian community, and so that has only been strengthened and deepened. And I have like a whole library of memories from this trip that I can incorporate into my work. I became really, really fascinated with this object that scholars call an incantation bowl. And they say it like kind of started around the 2nd century, but Assyrians very much contributed to this practice. And basically, it was uh, artisans would make a clay bowl, they would deliver them to the priests, and then you would go if you had some kind of physical ailment or sickness or wanted spiritual protection. You would go to the priest. You'd say, "I need healing for my leg that has been broken," and they would write from a codex of I call them prayers. They read like prayers. Around the inside of the bowl, basically calling on the name of God and asking for healing for this person. And so it was just, I became really interested in these objects as art objects. They're very beautiful, but also with this concept of the power of language to heal a person. And I kind of took that and was like, the power of language to heal our community. And so I don't like to use the word incantation. I think it's a little pejorative. I like to use the word prayer, so I've renamed them prayer bowls instead of incantation bowls. And so basically, it's a kind of a new project. I am asking for the Assyrian community to submit short oral histories, thoughts about being Assyrian, poetry, anything that is about the Assyrian experience now that I can then write on bowls to like kind of continue this ritual, but like remix it in a way and think about how words can heal our community now. And so ideally, a bunch of people will submit. I got submissions while on this trip on Gishru. And it will like culminate in this room full of bowls with the languages that we speak, the Assyrian language, along with audio recordings of us speaking our Assyrian experience in this way that is just like fully immersive in what the Assyrian identity looks like, sounds like, and also creates a component where we're the ones telling our histories and we're the ones speaking our experiences rather than outsiders coming and writing about us. Yeah.
Will you be writing these prayers personally in Assyrian inside the bowls?
Yes. Yes.
And you don't speak the language and you don't read or write, right?
Yes. So I've had a couple lessons. I took the Turlock Assyrian class where I learned how to write the letters, and I know what sounds they make. And so this is really a community project asking for something for the community. I'll be delivering something to the community, and I'm getting the community's help. So I'm partnering with Diana Atureta, who runs Assyrian circles. We're working with translators to get things translated. And this whole thing is also like Esther's language learning journey as I practice with these submissions. It's a way for me also to learn the language in a deeper way. And for people who don't speak Assyrian, if you send in your submission, we'll get it translated for you and send it back to you, so you too can speak your own experiences in
Where
Assyrian.
can they send their prayers? Can you give
So,
us a website or your email address, something where they can send you
yes,
their prayers?
it's www.prayerbowlarchive.com. You could submit on the website. If you follow Assyrian circles, we're also holding Assyrian circles where people can submit their prayer, we'll just say in a group setting, if that's easier for you, and get it translated either on the spot or like right after. So you have a couple options.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
As part of the Prayer Bowl archive, I need you to record your prayers. This will add an audio element and represent the diversity of languages the Assyrian people speak, the languages we've been forced to learn and pass down as a result of diaspora. I pray for freedom. It's really easy to record your prayers. Your phone should have a voice recording app. For iPhones, it's the Voice Memo app. Just press record and speak evenly into your microphone. Then upload that file into the submission form at www.prayerbowlarchive.com or email it to me at helloesterelia@gmail.com. When recording your prayer, record it in each language that you speak with a short pause in between. Thank you.
And Sarah, what is, are you planning on becoming an activist in any way?
Well, I already feel like, and I was joking about this on the trip, I'm that like weird Assyrian friend in my friend groups here, right? So now I can speak further to that and just keep spreading the word. But no, I do. I mean, there's a lot of projects that all of us now have been involved in through Gishru, which stay tuned. You know, we're working on a number of different cool fundraising efforts, which I'm excited about. But I've also been working on a genocide exhibit with Ruth Kambar, her and a number of different others. There's actually going to be an exhibit that's launching June 30th. So me being able to go on this trip too just fully adds to participating in that. Essentially what we're doing is we're telling Assyrian stories, coming over. Well, actually it's throughout any kind of time period, but predominantly naturally with my family background, for me, it's from that time leaving Urmia. But there's a number of different other folks that are going to be featured. It's going to be in Turlock, in Modesto, and it's sponsored by Cal State. So stay tuned for more info on that. But yeah, so that's a project that I'm involved in. I mean, the doors that this trip has opened as well and connections that we've been able to make, it's just beautiful. I've had a call yesterday with Assyrian Aid. I mean, any way that I can serve our community and just help spreading the word on what we saw there and just help make connections for a greater purpose, I'm really excited about.
Joe,
Yeah.
our journalist, you're going to do your activism through your writings.
That's right.
What are you planning on doing?
Number of things. And I actually wanted to piggyback on what Sarah said for a little bit about opening doors for the community. I think if people are considering going to Iraq, it's good to first go with a big group that has a structured schedule and you get a broad understanding of things. So when I first went in 2019, it was a group that was about the same size as our group now.
Which is how many people?
About 34. I think it was 34, right? And it was we had a packed itinerary, and you meet a lot of different
long?
people.
Sorry, for how long?
Oh yeah, it was about 2 weeks. Same as this one. So it's a packed itinerary. You meet with a lot of different people. You go to a lot of different places. You get a good, what I like to say, like a broad overview of things. And then when you go a second time, I encourage people to go back with a smaller group and maybe not as packed of an itinerary for the second time. So then you get more of a deeper understanding. You can stay at places a little bit longer. You can have longer conversations with people. That first trip is important. To build the connections and open the doors, like you said, Sarah, and then a second connection to like deepen those connections. And then we talked a little bit about this perception in the West, and I wanted to mention the perception and like the dangers that we talked about as well that are facing the community and how it takes different shapes. I think that there's a big danger in losing our identity. And I think a lot of media doesn't cite Assyrians or cite it properly, or oftentimes just refer to as an ancient group. There's a lot of pushback on the people there on using the term Assyrians to identify themselves, and there's some discrimination in finding different positions. So I think it's media's role to get our name out there and tell the story in a way that, as I mentioned before, it's not being told as much. But something as simple as saying, like calling ourselves Assyrians, shouldn't be as big of an issue as a lot of publications are. Like I've had a few instances where I've pushed back on editors that have changed my copy and in using the term Assyrians. They say Iraqi Christians, like, no, it's important to use the word Assyrians because there's a heritage tied to it.
Thank you for that.
And there's, it's a fight among editors, and that's big publications, and it's surprising to me.
Is it based on bias or is it based on ignorance?
I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like it's ignorance. I feel like a lot of it's ignorance, but
I hope it's ignorance and not bias. Yeah. Ignorance you can change. Bias you cannot.
I just have a quick thought too, but
sorry.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but as Joe was talking, I think especially the three of us being on here, maybe it's not directly activism, right? I know that was the question, but with all of us being part Assyrian, I think with that being said, it's more important than ever, especially with people intermarrying with other cultures, to really own that heritage too, because even, myself and my siblings at times have felt, okay, what does that mean for us? Can we claim it? Can we own this? I mean, it's important to say Assyrian, and whether you're a 10th Assyrian, a quarter Assyrian, 75% right, or 0.5%, if your family comes from this beautiful lineage and this ancient lineage, that we had this magical experience in this land, I feel more re-energized to just speak on that as well and to own that, because I think there's a lot of other people like us, and my siblings too are now kind of curious, oh, should we go next year? Like, what does this mean for me? So I feel a call and a responsibility for that as well, even more so, to just really lean into that and own it and just spread the word, because I think that a lot of other people are maybe feeling the same way, if that makes sense.
Bless your heart. And there will be more and more and more of Assyrians whose parents have been, married to non-Assyrians. And as one of you mentioned, I think it was perhaps Esther, your mother said you're not half Assyrian, you're double Assyrian. Was that Esther?
Yeah, we had talked, and she raised us saying you're 100% Assyrian, you're 100% Irish. You get to claim both, and you get to be both. And to speak to Sarah's point, I felt that, and I did claim my Assyrian heritage until I was told I couldn't by Assyrians, and in middle school, high school. And then it was also Assyrians who pulled me back into the community and said, yes, you are. You can claim this. And so it's, if you're 100% Assyrian, make a half Assyrian friend and pull them in.
We're going to go back here and we're going to speak better. We're on a mission.
Well, here at Shamiran Media, at Shamiran, one of the missions of us and our founder, my dear friend, Mariam Shamalta, is to promote the Assyrian language. And I sense that all three of you wished you spoke Assyrian. I mean, what's what's the harm speaking another
Definitely.
language? So I think for you to promote the language and to encourage parents who speak it fluently to speak it to their kids. It's difficult. I would attest to that. I have 3 kids who were born here and resisting speaking the language. And I always thought I was stronger than them. They were only children under my roof. So I insisted they speak the language. They are fluent and they thank me every day that I was stronger than they were in this category. So you are our voices to encourage parents to speak Assyrian to their kids. What is there to lose? And with that, I really thank you for joining us, opening your hearts, as I call you, the Gishru travelers to Atra. I really enjoyed our conversation. I wish we had all the time and I could sit and talk about a great many more details, but time is limited. But I thank you for your dedication, for going, visiting Atra, and that, Joe, if we make it known to others, non-Assyrians as well as Assyrians, that Atra isn't really that dangerous, it's safe, that perhaps a tourism would, a sense of tourism would start, and then that would help the economy of our Atra and overall well-being of people there.
Totally.
I thank you very much.
And it would help connect people to the ground there, put things in perspective.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll go back. You'll go back again and I'll join you next time. Good day.
Let's do it.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. Basi maraba.
لدقرة بوشم شانة بوشم شانة يدعت شميران جشقانت مغبن من بوشروخن عزيتون أطرا خزيتون لأنا لبي تبتوب لغا خشتت أطرا كلن أزخ هاي رخلون وخزخ أطرد أباهاتن جابو مويتن بسي مرابا بوشم شانة.
Mid-America Furniture, 7546 North Milwaukee, Niles, Illinois. Mid-America Furniture إلى only branch لخار هذا زوينا هايورا قبل أمسان عطوراي زودة من تلاي 5 شنة. وجو Mid-America Furniture هدية اتلو خسيل الرابع جورا. إنزونيتون Furniture قتشل بيت الديوخر ماسيتون قانيتون خراي خا coffee table ين خا mattress هر هذا زم ماسيتون قانيتون خا خراي خا TV stand. قتشل ختنا وشالو أي ست لخا إلى سدانتا وشابرتا وشتزا ونا أي ست قانيتون قدية ماترس خراي ين فري. وإذن آتيتون قم Mid-America Furniture تيمون وغزيمون شلو نو سكشنالز أخدية سكشنال لخا ماسيتون شخلي بيتون لو مت أرخد بيتون.
إيمان وايلة أكسيدنت اتنرابة ناشة ليطي متبصلتا قد شكلي. اتلا نسيانة بدنا كيسس ات انجري لو و بيالباية قريمخ. إن آتن ينكل بتت بيتا خزموخن يطانة اتلوخن بوقارة مخبرون المنيان التلفون 8 ربع شوا وچا 8 تري وچا 5 خا اشتا يعني توكن بيت injuryrights.com. شمي إلى توني كالغراكس كيام زمن لشان خلية يما.
Assyrian Foundation of America was established in 1964 as a 501c3 nonprofit in California to help needy Assyrians around the world, support Assyrian education, and preserve and promote the Assyrian language and culture. Since 1977, Nimbe magazine has been published under the auspices of the Assyrian Foundation of America and distributed around the world. Every day since inception, Assyrian Foundation of America has been a window of hope to keep Assyria alive. For more info, please visit AssyrianFoundation.org.